Here's everything we know about the next PlayStation showcase.
PS Plus is losing games again. Sony is giving you even more premium benefits, and here's a tip on fixing PS5 stick drift. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to PSReady. This is the midweek news update. PlayStation is hiding in the shadows right now. They're preparing for something. We think it is the showcase. I'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But for right now, we've got some fun news stories to go over, like this 79-cent PS5 game that's actually good. So the game is called We Were Here, and that's 79 cents. And then there's the sequel, We Were Here 2, spelled T-O-O. It's kind of clever. That one's on sale for $2.99. The first game came out back in 2017, and there have been 3 more releases in the series in 2018, 2019, and 2022. There's no Metacritic score for the PS4 or PS5 versions of the games, but on Steam, they are very positive with over 23,000 reviews, which honestly is crazy, right? Like, you see some big games come out. The game I'm playing right now is Midnight Suns, the Marvel game. That game only has like 9,000 Steam reviews. So seeing that there are over 23,000 of them, that is pretty good, and that means a lot of people played this game because, I don't know, probably like what, 10% at best of people who buy a game on Steam actually go back and review it. The description of the first game reads, lost in a frozen wasteland and split up from your partner inside an abandoned castle. The only possession you have left is a walkie-talkie. I've never played these games, and if I'm being real, I've never even heard of them, but I watched the trailer that was attached to this clickbait article, and honestly, it looked pretty good. And for 79 cents, you really can't beat it. So I went ahead, bought it right away. And if you guys want to know my impressions of this cheap ass game, let me know down in the comments below.
Well, it finally happened. Sony announced the next PlayStation showcase. It's happening Wednesday, May 24th at 1 p.m. Pacific, and they're going to have PS5 games, PSVR 2 games, and some third-party stuff as well as indie games. So it's finally real. Jeff Grubb was right. I am excited.
They've been cooking a new showcase for years now. It's been over a year since we got a PlayStation showcase where they reveal all the games for the PlayStation 5 we can be excited for, and I think there's some good stuff coming up in the one that's rumored. The first big game you're probably like guaranteed going to see at this showcase is Spider-Man 2. We've been waiting for a gameplay reveal on this bad boy for a long time now. They've started up the marketing with comic book releases. They split off Spider-Man Remastered for PS5. It's like 50 bucks just to buy it now. So they're obviously ramping up to a full-on gameplay reveal for Spider-Man 2. I just guarantee that'll be there. Another guarantee is a launch trailer or something of the sort for Final Fantasy 16. The Game Informer cover for that game just came out today, or the cover was revealed, and it's super awesome. You've got the main character standing in a hero pose on the front, and one of the summons from the game is behind him. It looks absolutely phenomenal. I'm super excited for this game. So that one's coming out around the same time as this event, right? Like the first week of June. So I bet you'll see a launch trailer or some DLC announcement or some special surprise with it announced there as well. A left field announcement that's had a ton of rumors leak out recently is Resident Evil 9.
This time, it has to be different.
Apparently this game is ready to go for either November of this year or early next year. It's going to be called allegedly Apocalypse, and they're going to work the 9 Roman numeral into the Apocalypse word like they have with 7 and 8 with Biohazard and Village. It's going to take place in the southwestern United States. It's going to be like True Detective themed. It kind of seems like they're going to have Wendigos. Chris Redfield's going to be a focus alongside Jill Valentine and Claire Redfield. It sounds like a great thing if all these rumors end up being true. So I'd expect the next Resident Evil game to be announced at this showcase because Resident Evil Village was announced at the first PS5 showcase way back in 2019. Another game we'll definitely see at this showcase is Silent Hill 2 Remake. This game apparently is a lot farther along in development than we thought because it was supposed to be announced last year during June at E3, but then Konami pulled out at the last second. So when they announced it during the big Silent Hill showcase, I think earlier this year or late last year, that was basically when the game was pretty far along in development.
Could she really be here, waiting for me?
Silent Hill fans are never happy. I don't even think they like playing Silent Hill games. From what I've seen of this remake, it looks awesome. I've played the original Silent Hill 2. I think it's a solid game. I just really hate the combat, and I would love that to be modernized, and all of the leaks we've seen of the way the combat works in this remake looks like it's very similar to what we saw in the Resident Evil remake. So I'm really excited for that game. I think it's going to be cool, but if it sucks, there's like 15 other Silent Hill games on the horizon, so maybe one of them will be good. Of course, the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake and the Bloodborne remake slash PC port slash maybe sequel have all been rumored from Blue Point Games. We got their weird Christmas card at the end of last year that basically teased Metal Gear, Castlevania, and a couple other games. So hopefully we get to see more of that. And I'm really crossing my fingers for this Bloodborne remake, or at the very least, a performance patch for the game that gets it to run at a consistent 30 or 60 FPS. That would be awesome, because even though it's a second party game, it's still under the PlayStation umbrella. It's a PlayStation exclusive. I really would like to see Sony give it the love that they've given their other games that they've made over the past few years. It is definitely time for a release date on PC for Ghost of Tsushima, and of course a tease at least for Ghost of Tsushima 2. There is no doubt in my mind that that's what Sucker Punch is working on. We know the movie is coming out sooner rather than later. Like, let's get the ball rolling on the marketing for Ghost of Tsushima 2. I think Sony kind of dropped the ball with that game when it came out. It was very clear that they didn't really feel like it was going to be successful, and then people absolutely loved it. It's one of the best-selling PS4 games, and then they did the director's cut, which was like a glorified patch that they charged $30 for. So I think they kind of need to right some wrongs with the Ghost of Tsushima series, and the best way to do that is to announce a sequel. Bend Studio's been working on a brand new IP ever since Days Gone came out. Now would be a great time to announce that, I think. I'm pretty sure this one will have a lot shorter of a dev cycle than Days Gone did, because with that game, they were moving from primarily portable, like handheld game development up to a full-on new IP for PlayStation 4. It's a whole open world game, also built in Unreal Engine 4, which is uncommon for Sony. So yeah, I feel like they've kind of worked out the kinks in development, and we'll probably see whatever they're working on at this showcase. The Last of Us multiplayer game, it needs to be announced. We've gotten concept art for this game over the past couple months. That's not enough. This was supposed to be the multiplayer mode for The Last of Us Part 2, which was a PS4 game that came out back in 2019, right? Like, this game has been worked on way too long. Sony needs to either or get off the pot. I don't think there's that much hype for it already, so they really need to show us why we should be excited for The Last of Us multiplayer game, and the best way to do that is to give it some time at a showcase. Pie in the Sky Wish, Wolverine, that'd be cool to see. I hope we get some more Resident Evil remakes. Maybe instead of Resident Evil 9, they could tease the remake of 5. 5 came out pretty soon after 4, and it's pretty much like the same game, just in a different setting, and it has co-op. What I really hope with 5 remake is that they just get rid of co-op. It makes the game so not scary and just full action that it's like kind of crazy, and they were testing the AI for a co-op partner that's not being controlled by a human with Luis in 4, so let's just focus on that instead of true multiplayer, because that's like the worst thing to have in a horror game. Next up, there are a lot of new PS5 owners out in the wild lately, so I wanted to give you a tip in this video if you're a brand new PS5 owner. So one of the worst things that's been plaguing DualSense controllers and basically every other controller since the beginning of time is stick drift. So over time, the dead zone in your controller kind of like goes out of whack, and you'll notice that when you put your controller down, your camera starts moving. Thankfully, I've never had it on a PlayStation controller, but I've had it on 2 Xbox controllers. I had it on my Boba Fett controller that I got from Razer, and I had it on my Cyberpunk 2077 Xbox One controller, and it sucked. But Sony thought ahead here with the DualSense Edge, and they came out with this thing. It's a $20 little module for your controller. So if you ever get stick drift on your DualSense Edge, you go pick this up from the store or Sony Direct or down in the description, and you give me a little bit of a kickback on it. And then once you open it up, you have this, which is the stick module. It's just like a little joystick in there. All you have to do is take that bottom half plastic piece of the DualSense off, and then it slides right out. You slide this new module in, and you're good to go. It even comes along with the little button here for switching the profiles on your DualSense Edge, which honestly is the feature that I didn't really think I was going to use on this thing that I ended up using quite a lot. Switching the profiles is great if you're playing an FPS. I ended up having to switch it to a less responsive curve for Dead Space because the right stick, the camera was flying all over the place, and it was really hard to aim my plasma cutter right at the leg on the necromorph so I could shoot his leg off, and then his arm, and then his head. It was really tough to do that with the launch profile, I guess, for the aiming, and turning down the sensitivity in the game didn't really help. So I ended up up doing it with the DualSense Edge's built-in tuning that it comes along with. So yeah, if you ever get stick drift, you can just pick up one of these $20 modules, slot it in, and you're good to go. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, it'd be better if they just included Hall effect sensors. I disagree, because that would make the controller even more expensive. And if they did that on the main DualSense, we'd probably be paying $100 for that controller instead of 70. So give me a controller that might have stick drift after a while, but probably won't. And then if it does, I can just swap it out. And I really hope that when the PS5 Slim Gen 2 or whatever it's going to be called is announced, they also announce some changes to the main DualSense that'll allow you to switch the modules in that as well. Next on the list, the monkey paw is curling in on all the great PS Plus additions we had this month. I think there was something like 22 new games or 23 new games added to PS Plus Premium and Extra. And it turns out the reason we got so many new games is because we're losing about just as many. Around 17 games are being pulled from PS Plus soon. I'm just gonna go down the list here of all 17 games, all right? We're starting with Descenders, Party Hard, 9 Monkeys of Shaolin, Ash of God's Redemption, Fire Pro Wrestling World, Black Mirror, Witchwood, John Wick Hex, Kiwi, No Straight Roads, Defense Grid 2, Joe Devers, Lone Wolf, Agents of Mayhem, Gods Will Fall, Red Faction 1 and 2, and Redeemer Enhanced Edition. So there's like one game on this list I would say that's actually worth playing of my knowledge, right? Like maybe some of these games are good and I just haven't played them. Descenders is a game where it's like a roguelite where you're riding mountain bikes downhill and you're racing, and it's actually supposed to be pretty fun. It's a pretty cheap game though, so if you really enjoy playing it, you might want to pick it up on PS5 and give the developers some extra cash, even though it's leaving PS Plus. It's a cheap game, right? I think it's like 17 bucks. So all things considered, I'd say these 17 games that are leaving are definitely a fair trade-off for the 22 games we got earlier in the month. I think that list was like 90% bangers, and Sony's done a great job adding games to PS Plus. The one that I think is a little egregious that they've taken off recently is Spider-Man, and now it turns out the reason they did that is because this new version of Spider-Man Remastered, if you have any other version of Spider-Man in your PS Plus account, you can just upgrade to Remastered for $10. They obviously didn't want to make it so that people who downloaded it from PS Plus Extra on their PS4 could upgrade for 10 bucks. And I'm sure because it's Sony, they didn't have the technology to block that. So they basically just took it away from PS Plus Extra and said, you got to pay 50 bucks, or you could be smart and go to GameStop and buy the PS4 version for $10 and then upgrade it to the new version for $10 and just have a great time playing these games at 4K. And I got to give Sony credit here on making PS Plus Premium actually feel a little more worth it now. So one feature that they've added in alongside these PS Plus Premium Classic games is trophies. So when you get PSP games like the upcoming one, Pursuit Force, or Siphon Filter Logan Shadow, even though these are PSP games and PSP games never had trophies, Sony is retroactively going back and adding in trophies to these games, which honestly is pretty cool because there's a long-standing rumor out there that Sony was looking into adding in trophies to the PSP way back in the day. I mean, they even went as far as letting you log into your PSN account when they launched that on the PlayStation 3, but they never shipped the feature on the PSP because it was so easy to pirate games for it that they didn't want people to be able to figure out how to hack the thing and then just give themselves a whole bunch of platinum trophies. Because at that time, Sony actually cared about trophies and made it like kind of a cool thing that you could show on your profile. You could say, hey, I've got like 35 platinums. Look at me. I've got a trophy level that's like thousands higher than yours. Sony's really kind of given up on trophies. They basically buried them in the PS5's UI. They've updated it to make it a little more obvious where they are, but overall, the whole trophy system hasn't really been a huge feature. So with that being said, it is nice to see them retroactively going back to PSP games that never got trophies and then add them in so you can get a little extra challenge out of your game. So back when I talked about that studio Sony had where they were working on an unannounced shooter and they laid off a bunch of people from that studio, I said this is definitely not the end of PlayStation layoffs, and I actually predicted this, which I don't want to like brag about being right about studios laying people off because that feels kind of, but yeah, I said that the studio who made Destruction All-Stars, they're called Deviation Games, they were working on a Twisted Metal game and it was actually taken away from them and given to another first-party studio, and that was a good reason as to why I thought maybe they would either be shut down or experience layoffs, and it looks like that's exactly what happened. So back in 2021 when they were working on Destruction All-Stars and this Twisted Metal game, they had around 100 people, and while there's no word on how many people were let go from the studio, there were a lot of high-profile departures that were listed on LinkedIn LinkedIn. It looks like the studio is going into small mode so they can work on pre-production or become a support studio for other bigger first-party Sony studios. Again, like I said last time, this sucks, but I think it's good that Sony can recognize when games aren't working out, and even if they are pretty far along, like the Shooter or Sucker Punch's game that they did in between Infamous Second Son and Ghost of Tsushima, which actually was like totally playable and had cutscenes leak out and things like that, they canceled it even though it was pretty far along because they would rather release a quality game and take the money hit on the chin and make more money back later than release a game that's not finished or kind of crappy like Redfall. So yeah, while it sucks to see developers lose their jobs, I'm sure these people who are all talented will land on their feet and things will just get better over at PlayStation, and there's always studios hiring. Like I see Sony hiring all the time, I see Microsoft hiring all the time. It sucks that people lose their jobs, but I'm sure everything will work out just fine.